David as a scholar. Yeah, and we also dealt with David, the hardships he went through, all the difficulties, and his Moabite past, his dark, skeletons of his past. So today we're going to deal with his greatest moments.
Rabbi, you have the microphone?
Put it on here.
So this is a magnet, and then it just attaches to the clip.
Yeah.
Rabbi, is it the text you're reading from, or is it?
Here. I sometimes do the text. Sometimes I don't, but I got it now.
What page?
Right now we're going to start on page 118. I think. Let me just check 1 second. No, I'm wrong. We're going to start on page 265. Okay, today we're going to discuss David's greatest moment. We once mentioned before that David in his darkest moments was being pursued by his son. He was running away. Everything he had built for the past 30 years was just crumbling before his eyes. He was the most loyal, leader of Klal Yisrael. We got rid of all of our enemies. He built up Yerushalayim. He captured Yerushalayim. He brought the Aron into Yerushalayim. He blessed the people. There was so much blessing and bounty, and yet somehow people started following another person by the name of Avshalom, and the insanity increased until all of a sudden, it was stripped from under him. He lost his entire malchus, and he had to run away. And for 6 months, he was living in the, struggling, living out of Eretz Israel, living, not out of Eretz Israel, but living far away. And during this time where everything was crumbling in front of him, on top of a mountain appeared this man named Shimi ben Gera. And Shimi ben Gera started stoning him and throwing, stones at him and earth at him and cursing him. And Shimi ben Gera was a famous man. He was one of the great leaders of the tribe of Binyamin. And David's with his men, and Shimi ben Gera is tossing stones at him and cursing him and saying, "See what happens to you, you sinner, you adulterer, you murderer." He's really ripping at him. And so David's right-hand man, Avishai, turns to him and says, "Let me go up there and cut off his head. Now that dead dog's head, let me just kill him." And David said, "Let him." Hashem told him to curse. Not that Hashem told him to curse, but he was seeing this as the hand of Hashem, and he said, maybe in the merit that I accept this and see it that way, Hashem will return me one day back to Yerushalayim. I'll be able to come back. And this was, unbeknownst to David, but this was his greatest moment. The bells went off. All of a sudden, whatever he was striving for, which we'll go into a second what that was, but at this moment when he saw that all the hardships and all the circumstances of life are all from Hashem, right? He wrote Sefer Tehillim, so everything is from Hashem, right? The stick that's hitting you it's not the stick that the dog bites. The dog bites the stick, but he realized there's someone behind the stick. It's a person, right? It's Hashem. I'm sorry, But so David, when he said, "Shimi ben Gera, who's cursing me now, it's all from Hashem." So at that moment, he reached a level of realizing that even the guy who's cursing him on his darkest moments and being able to humbly accept that, that's a great level for a person to reach to. And that's what he did when he said, "Hashem mar lo lekalel." And by the way, by sparing Shimi ben Gera, guess what happened later? Shimi ben Gera, goes on with life, has a child. That child has another child, and it turns out Mordechai. Mordechai descends from Shimi ben Gera. Had David killed him on the spot and lopped off his head, we wouldn't have Mordechai. So somehow the chain of events are very powerful. I say it's the greatest moment because David himself davened to Hashem. He said to Hashem, "I want to be great like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov." That was his question. Because at one point in David's life, David realized from Hashem a certain hint that he was destined for real greatness. I mean, obviously he's the first king of Israel with all, anointed by Shmuel Navi, he's destined for greatness. But when David at one point in his life said to Nasan Navi, I'm living in a house of cedars. I'm living in a nice house, and the house of God is not built. How could I live that way? I want to build a house of God. So he wanted to build a temple. For 400 years we've been in Eretz Israel. No one built a temple. David says, I want to build a temple. Right? He's like, now is the time. So Nasan Navi in his purity of thought said, build it. Whatever you're doing, Hashem is helping you succeed. Go for it. And that night Hashem appeared to Nasan Navi in a dream, in a prophecy, and said to him, quickly go back to him and tell him, no, it's not for you to build it. It'll be for your son to build. There'll be a dynasty that'll come out of you. And I'm going to make you a name like the name of the greats. That's what he said to David. I'll make you a name like the name of the greats, which was like saying to him, I'll make you like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov potentially. I'll give you a name like the name of the greats. You have that potential. So David davened to Hashem. He said, Hashem, there's a Magen Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. I want to also be Elokei David. I want to be on there. And Chazal say what he was asking was, I want to be on the chariot of Hashem. On Hashem's chariot, there's Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and I want to be the fourth wheel, the fourth wheel or the fourth leg to the chariot of Hashem. Now this is a little bit like, and that's what he was asking for. So Hashem answered him, but them I tested. This is what we said last week. I tested them. Avram had 10 tests, and I'm sure Yitzchak had a great test with Esav and all the different switching and blessing Yaakov, and Yaakov, like, what didn't happen to him? He had a father-in-law from hell, and he had a brother who wanted to kill him. Like, these people, his daughter was raped. Like, his son was kidnapped. These people had tests. So Hashem said to David, I didn't give you a test. Which at this point, David is, with the point we're at right now, he's like 56. And if you remember from our classes before, David's life was not an easy life. Like, from the get-go, he was oppressed by his family. He was a black sheep. He was pursued by his father-in-law. His life was not an easy life. And yet God is telling him, I never really tested you. So what does that mean? I never really tested you. So I guess there's tests that we get. Sometimes we wonder, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing in life? How do I know? And somehow, I once, for the Sifrei Musar, came out with it's not me, but that those things that keep coming up for you, like the challenges that you have, those might be an indication of what your purpose is. And those things that you're strong at and you have good strengths at, those might also be an indication of your positive purposes that you're supposed to be doing, right? Yeah.
How was David such a pure neshama without all these tests?
How was he so pure?
Yeah. I remember the story you said where Hashem saw the neshama and it was only in the world for 3 hours.
Only for a few hours, right?
Yeah, and then suddenly he's like, you can't have this neshama live for so little. But how with that? Without all these tests,
But-
how is that possible?
But again, if Adam,
Because he didn't have tests,
well, again, if Adam gave him his 70 years of his life, that means he had a spark of Adam's soul in him. That means he was a collective person there to help all of Klal Yisrael, to help the world even. All of mankind was somehow, and Mashiach does come from him, which will affect all of mankind. So he did have, but also he was born, we said, when he was born, he was red. And everyone thought this guy, and they were right. He was red. He was with Esav. He did have this, violent urge to kill. he did have the bad midos. He did have the koyach of tuma, which came with nida, which is why he was red also. There were a lot of things that he had to overcome. His whole life was overcoming his nature. Right? There was so much self-control he had, and that built him, and he became a great person because of that. I think he did that with the power of Torah and being connected to tzaddikim. He must have, had something to help him with that, because Hashem doesn't, make it uneven. But he had a strong, he's very pure. So he asked Hashem, give me a test then. Aseni Hashem, it's one of the Tehillim. And they asked the question, well, first of all, again, like I said, everything up till now was just gravy. It wasn't like a core test of who he is. Somehow this next test about, the test that he's going to be challenged with is going to somehow challenge the core of who he is in a much deeper way. And it does. So So he asked for a test. Even though in davening we say, at the end of the Birchot HaShachar, we say, V'al tiveni lo de nisayon v'lo de bizayon v'al tishlet bani yetzra v'rechin marmachara v'davken v'yetzato masim tovim. The last bracha and the brachos in the morning is, don't test me. Don't bring me to a test. So part of Tehillim is test me, right? And yet we have another part of our daily davening, which is don't test me. So how do we put that together? Test me, but don't test me. Yeah.
Are there ways to become a great person without being tested?
It's a good question. Like, if we're asking Hashem, don't test us. So like, are we asking Hashem not to could I be a great person if I don't, interact with people, or if I keep quiet all the time and I don't engage with people? Because then I won't be sinning and speaking Lashon Hora or all the other things that come up with just being part of a community. And yet on the other hand, like, our life mission is to be like involved on somewhat with, we go to a minyan together and we have our wives, we have children. So it's, so what was the question again?
Test it. Like if it's a positive thing that we ask not to be tested because greatness comes out of being tested.
Yeah. So you're right. You're right. So testing is good, and our lives are filled with it, and we have ups and downs in life, and you think you're doing so well, and all of a sudden you feel a certain distance, and things are hard. But that's all part of, you'll have a difficult roommate, it's all part of what Hashem wants us to do to grow. So like, how do you put that together with asking Hashem not to test us? So I heard like this, that on the one hand, we're asking not to be tested, because that's the attitude of what if I fail? So it's like there's an attitude of Hashem, please protect me from sin. So I ask not to be tested because there's an attitude of, please, I don't want to do something wrong. On the other hand, we want to actually ask, like in Tehillim, test me, Hashem, because we want challenges in life. We want to accomplish. But if you just want to accomplish and you ask for a test, and it's not grounded with don't test me, because there's so much to fail. If it's just like test me, so then the balance isn't there. It's almost like, there was a guy who was chosen to be a Rav of a community. So he asked the Chafetz Chaim, I don't want to take on this position to be the Rav. I might, make mistakes and there's things like that, and I don't want to become a rabbi in that community. So the Chafetz Chaim said, well, who should they choose? A guy who's afraid of sinning, or a guy who's not afraid of sinning? Like if they choose a guy who's just like, yeah, no problem. I'll go in there. Like, if I make a mistake, I made a mistake. Who cares? She says that's not the right person for that job. The guy who's got the attitude of what if I make a mistake and I have to be careful and I'm afraid that I might make a mistake, such a person could be the leader of that community because he's now grounded in fear of Hashem and wanting to do the right job and doing what's right, and that's like what motivates him, so then he can handle the test. So the way that I understood this from the Pachad Yitzchak regarding this question of like how do you put together, don't test me with, yes test me, was that when you have the attitude of don't test me, then you could embrace the challenges of life. And by David asking, so I think that answers your question in a certain sense that we ask Hashem not to test us because we don't want to sin, but that will give us the strength that when the challenges come to us, we'll be able to actually overcome them. So again, it's come almost like they come together. Boy, it's hard having it recorded. So I lose a certain amount of the, just like, hi mom. First time on camera. Yeah. So David asked for a test. So let's look at the pasuk. So the truth is, David wanted to be on the chariot of Hashem, and it wasn't like, I want to be famous. I want to be like on the chariots of Hashem. I should be. There's Avram, there's Yitzchak, then there's me. It wasn't about that. It was about Hashem's honor. David was completely about Hashem's honor. And the chariot of Hashem is the idea of how Hashem runs the world. Like he runs the world, his chariot. We said in the beginning of creation, the Ruach Elokim Rachefes al Pnei Hamayim, the Spirit of God was like hovering over the water. Like God was like, somehow the way he runs the world is through his chariot. I know what that means. So I shouldn't be talking about it. But that means that somehow Avram, through what he did, he brought God into the world in a way that God now runs the world with kindness in a whole different level because of what Avram brought to the world. Avram saw the kindness of Hashem and he embodied it so much so that Hashem shapes the world now through Avraham. Like when Avram davened for Sodom, Sodom was the most wicked of places. and Avram, our first, example of prayer in the Torah. Avram turned to Hashem. If there's 50 righteous people, don't destroy Sodom. If there's 45, don't. If there's 40, and then he says, Hashem, please don't be angry with me. Don't be upset with my audacity. If there's 30 people, save Sodom. Avram's risking his life almost. He's don't be angered by my chutzpah. He's pushing the envelope here. And if there's 30, if there's 20, and finally, let me ask one more time, if there's 10. And then Hashem says, okay, if there's 10, and it says that he created a reality now. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says if there's 10 righteous people, it protects a city. Avram created that, so the world is now run in a way like Avram created. Now, if there's 10 righteous people, they could protect the whole city because of Avram's prayers. He succeeded in that. Sodom got destroyed, right? But he created a reality in the world. So if Avram's running and doing kindness and bringing chesed to the world, so Hashem runs the world now through the way Avram, saw God. And then Yitzchak came along with Yitzchak, the avoda, the sacrifice, putting himself on the altar. His life was a life of hardship and devotion to Hashem. And then Yaakov, what he had, his truth and everything else, all those things became the way Hashem runs the world because these great people brought it down. What David wanted is he wanted to be on the chariot as well because David represents Malchus. That Malchus represents kingship everywhere. That means he wanted that Hashem should not just relate to the Jewish people and to the world in a semi-way that way. He wanted the entire world to have, the influence of God. And everyone, all of mankind, Jew and non-Jew alike, there should be Malchus, God's kingship. All these things that Hashem reveals to the world should be so global that there's no questions anymore. That's what it would be if David gets on the chariot. It means Malchus, the kingship of Hashem is now global. It's everywhere. So it takes Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and brings it to a whole new level of kingship. Somehow it brings it more out. And that was what he wanted. It wasn't for himself. He wanted God to be more revealed. Through this she'll be more revealed. So give me a test so I could somehow, get on the chariot of Hashem and, so to speak, bring that revelation to the world. I just want to point out maybe even ourselves, maybe we ourselves could bring certain things down to the world as well. Not just Avram, who brought down 10 people could save a city, but even if we relate a certain way, we could also bring down an influence from Hashem to the world. There was a story of, I forgot him, he was Chofer Sichim, I forgot his first name, but he's in the Gemara. He was a man who used to dig, maybe his name is Choni, I forgot his name, but he used to dig cisterns, holes, to wells, so that when people, he did a circular, I'm thinking someone else though. It was something Chofer Sichim. That's the guy who dug the wells. And so the people who were coming up for the Oli Regel who were thirsty, they would come up to Shalayim. There'd always be place for them to drink and for their, and livestock, and they could bring out, So he was the one who basically the refreshment stands. I go to, you go to a place, they have all these cold waters and cold drinks, and it's such a Jewish thing. I don't know if you ever went to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, there's just they're feeding 40,000 people, it's amazing. So he would set up all these different things, and the people would benefit from. One day his daughter fell into one of the holes. So they didn't know if she was alive or not. If anything, they thought she was dead. And they couldn't get her out, they couldn't find her. So they went to Hanina ben Dosa. Hanina ben Dosa was the famous tzaddik who miracles happen to him all the time. The story about, the same person who made the vinegar light will make the candles light. Hanina ben Dosa was an amazing, person. So Hanina ben Dosa said, when they came to him, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. She's fine. A man cannot, dig holes like that and have a daughter die in one of those holes. Just can't be. And he said it again. An hour went by, another hour. He said, still, she's fine. After 3 hours, I think the third time, he said, she's already out. And they went and they found out, and there she was out. And she told a whole story, some miracle happened, someone took her out, it was, whatever it was. The Gemara goes on and says, like we said, it couldn't happen if So then it asks, but wait a second, the same person who dug the wells, Tosfos mentions, his son later on, years later, was in the desert and died of thirst. So you just this guy's been providing Coca-Cola and refreshments for everybody, for all these years. His daughter was saved because Hanina ben Dosa said, like, it can't happen. And now he's got a son who dies of thirst in the desert. So how do you answer that? So the Shita Mekubetz's answer is, you know why? Because Hanina ben Dosa wasn't alive anymore. Once Hanina ben Dosa died, so then that reality stopped existing. So since Hanina ben Dosa wasn't alive, he believed so firmly that can't be, because that was his level of Amunah, so therefore there was a protection. And I was thinking, we ourselves also have that. When we judge a person favorably, Hashem relates that person favorably. If you like your roommate, so God's going to be more compassionate to your roommate. And if you feel like, dagger eyes at somebody else and you're thinking negatively about him, that also could bring out a certain judgment, right? So we have to I kind of got sidetracked. I'll get back to the story now. We're at now at David's greatest moments. He was being stoned by Shimon ben Gera, and at that moment he became bing in the background. All of a sudden he is now on the Merkava. Like at age 56, at this great challenge, the darkest moments in his life, when he's being stuffed down by a great man who's probably like Rav Moshe Feinstein. Shimon ben Gera was one of the Gedolei Ador, and he was on the other side against David. And you have him stoning him and cursing him and everything else, and David at that moment to say it's all from God. At that moment, he reached a level where his kingship was so strong that in the darkest of moments, in the darkest of places, he still saw God. That put him on the chariots of Hashem to be now, the fourth wheel. Let's go into the story about Bathsheba, because that was the test that God gave him. God said, "Oh, you want a test? I'll give you a test. Not only will I give you a test, I'll tell you what the test is going to be. It's going to be a test in the area of your taivas, your passions, your passion for women. That's where your test is going to be." So David is now going to be faced by this awesome test. Here it goes, chapter 11. It happened in the turn of the year, at the time when the kings go forth, and David had sent Yoav along with his servants and all of Israel. And they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. So David's attacking a city of Ammon, right? And David is staying in Yerushalayim, it says. So it happened towards evening that David arose from the bed and strolled on the roof of the king's house. From atop the roof, he saw a woman bathing. So we said before, there's midrashim that says he was shooting an arrow, and all of a sudden, this arrow, he was shooting it at some kind of bird, whatever. It knocked over her curtain. It came down, and he saw her face. There she is bathing, right? There she is bathing, this beautiful woman. The woman was very beautiful, it says. David sent to inquire about the woman, and someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent messengers and took her. What does it mean he took her? She went willingly. She was taken. She came to him and he lay with her, and she had been cleansing herself from her impurity. It means it's telling us that he came to her and he lay with her. That means he lived with her. Yeah, that was his test, and he just failed his test. And it says that Hashem told him this test the day before, like a day later already, all of a sudden somehow the filters on his camera, his phone isn't working all of a sudden, like the day before, he told him you're going to be tested with your taivas, the beauty. Was it taiva? What drew him towards her? She was a 10. Like what drew him towards Bathsheba? David, is a mad man, a guy, chest hairs breaking through his shirts. We're talking about a guy like that, or we're talking about something maybe deeper on that, whatever attracted him to her. And he sent men, she took her, she came to him, and then it says that she had been cleansing herself from impurity. I mean, she was on the roof. Why was she on the roof? Was she, chewing away the doves? Was she baking cookies? She was on the roof because she had a mikvah on the roof. Women in the olden days, they went to the mikvah, even when their husband's in battle, because we'll see Uriah Hittite was her husband, he was in battle. But the women who used to go to the mikvah, they had a private place on the roof. They built the mikvah, the rainwater, right? How do you get the rainwater? And women, when they got their period, they would, in order to eat kachim or truma or any kind of holy food, they'd have to go to the mikvah. Not just because of their husband. Back in the day, people were reading chunk of lamb, sacrifice, I'll eat that. You have to go to the mikvah first. Hopefully Pesach will come. We're going to bring all our kids and dunk them in the mikvah and go to eat a korban Pesach one day. I have one son who's vegetarian. He can't eat. He'll throw up if he eats food. One day you're going to have to eat, you have to go to the mikvah, eat, you have to cut your nails, do all the different things women do. We don't do that when we go to the mikvah. We just dunk. You have to brush your teeth, clean your pupik, clean out your ears, brush your hair. Yeah, so she was on the roof. Now, if he was committing adultery, why is it important for the Torah to tell us, for the Navi to tell us, oh, by the way, she was toveling herself from mikvah to be tahor. Because David, it's just interesting. some want to say that that's a proof that he wasn't committing adultery. Because why does the Torah tell me, oh, and she was also not a nida? If you're with a nida, it's an isser kares. It's not as severe as adultery. So the Torah is already telling us, oh, by the way, she was also up there and she was pure. She wasn't nida. So when David took her, she wasn't nida. She was, but her husband was in battle. She's the wife of Uriah Hittite. Okay, the plot thickens. She then returned to her house, right? The woman conceived. She's like, sends a little messenger, I'm pregnant. The woman conceived. She sent the messenger, to which she told David, I have conceived. What now? Okay? So I didn't really want to go into all the details of this, but we're here, so we're going to have to go into a little bit. David sent a messenger to Yoav. Send me Uriah the Hittite. So Yoav sent Uriah to David, and Uriah came to him, and David said, how are you doing? How's Yoav in the battlefront? How are the people doing? And David then said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. What does it mean, go down to your house and wash your feet? I can wash my feet anywhere. Wash your nose, clean your legs. Go to your house and wash your feet. It's an expression for go home. You're away from the battle now. Go home. Your wife is probably waiting for you. Go home and wash your feet. It's a way of saying be with your wife and then go back to the battle. They'll send you back. Why is he doing that? What's going on over here? He doesn't want. He wants to hide the fact that it's his kid. So he's gonna try and smoke screen it. He'll go there. He'll be with the wife. He'll think, it's my wife. She's pregnant. It has nothing to do with then David will figure something out. Like when the kid grows up, when he turns bar mitzvah, it's like surprise, I'm your dad. Something's got to go on over here. But he's got some plan going on over here, right? So he sent for also how could David live with her? It's adultery. So we said already before that David, when he went to the battlefield, when Goliath was there, he was getting these contracts from his brothers that you had to divorce your wife before you went to battle. Because if you went to battle and they didn't find you after a while, that's it. Your wife is stuck for the rest of her life. I don't know what the soldiers do nowadays in Tzahal, but there is something that I think there is something that Rabbanut set up. They give out a conditional get. If I don't come back, then therefore we're divorced. I know, that's also true. That's also true. But what do you do if you're lost in battle? And they never know, could your wife ever marry? So there's a conditional get, a conditional divorce which people give. So Uriah Hittite, the Gemara says, gave a get to his wife before he left. If I don't return from battle, you're divorced. But David seems to be bringing him back from battle. So in other words, she was divorced when he left. Here, you're divorced on condition, or you're divorced now. When I get back, I'll remarry you. Maybe that was what was going on. Or if I don't come back, you're divorced retroactively. Whatever it was, David was with her in a time where she was divorced, so she was a single woman at that time. Doesn't look so perfect, in terms of we are not amused, the English, we find you guilty of immoral conduct. It's not and yet, David goes ahead with this, and then when he sees that she's pregnant, he now goes and brings Uriah Hittite back to be with his wife. Uriah Hittite says, so Uriah Hittite. I just lost the page. He sent for Uriah the Hittite. So Yoav sent Uriah to David. Uriah came to him. David inquired of his welfare. Go wash your feet, right? So Uriah left the house of the king, and a royal feast was sent after him. So it's here you go, roses, flowers, chicken a la Maine and some, and some lamb. And he was sent on the way to, go home. But Uriah lay down at the entrance of the king's house, along with all the Lord's servants, and not go down to his house. So plan ain't working so well, is it? And not only that, he kind of defied David in front of everybody, because David said to him in public, you go home, go home, you're on furlough right now. Gave him a whole feast, and instead of just he just in front of everybody, he goes with in the servants' quarter of all of David's men, and he lays down to go sleep there. They told David, saying, Uriah not going to his house. So David said to Uriah, are you not coming from a journey? Why did you not go to your house? So now Uriah could say to David, okay, I had a reason. But what Uriah does is he basically says, I'm not listening to you. my master out there is, on the battlefield. Why should I go to my wife when everyone else is like sitting there like in the battlefield, like in living in tents? But to say that in front of David, my master is on the field, like, what? Wait a second, you're in front of the king, your highness, like, my master, it was almost like it shows deep inside a Freudian slip over here that like, who are you loyal to the king or to the general? Like it's almost like a rebellion. So Uriah is now forfeiting his he's like we're like he's like crossing some lines over here. So he goes to David and he says, why'd you go home? Why'd you go down to your house? So Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in huts, and my lord Yoav and the servants of my lord, Yoav, are camping out in the field. Shall I then come to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? By your life, I swear by your life, David, and the life of your soul, I will not do such a thing. That's pretty brazen to do it to a king. A king got, a king could say, okay, snuff him out. Now, but instead, David decides to give him a hero's death. He'll send him to the battlefront. He'll send him to a place which is very dangerous. He leaves messages with Yoav, his general, pull back when he when he gets to the front lines. Don't bring the reinforcements that he needs. And then Uriah goes into the battlefront, the most dangerous of places, and Yoav pulls back a little bit. Uriah gets killed. Yoav sends messengers to David. We lost Uriah in a battle, and David, job is done. And then he takes Bathsheba and he brings her to his house. He marries her, a hero. She's the widow of a hero, famous. He was one of the heroes of David. If you look in chapter in the end of this book, on chapter 23, so you'll see that it lists the 33 heroes of David. One of the 33 greatest heroes, those who were close with him, was Uriah Hitti. He was a mighty hero of David, and you couldn't be in David's army unless you had righteousness. You couldn't. If a guy was strong, but cussed under his, whenever he hit his, whatever. If he had bad midos or sins, he'd be killed in battle. No one wants to be next to a guy who's going to get blown up. When they went to battle, if you had any sins, or you built a house recently, or had a wife, and you got married recently, but you had to be pure of sin. Most of these people in battle, you'll see, they're heads of based people inside Hedron, Talmudei Chachamim, they're the people who fought were the righteous people.
I don't know which Gemara it is, but apparently there's a Gemara that says that what David did wasn't a sin, and it wasn't. It was like if the Talmud thinks that what he did was a sin, he's a fool, and if he thinks that he did something right, he's a fool.
I think it says he's making a mistake. Gemara on Shabbos says, anyone who thinks David sinned is making a mistake. And yet, we'll see in a minute that, David does this, a year goes by, 9 months. First of all, the Psukim go out and say that, 1 second. I'm going to get to that in a second. The Gemara on Shabbos says, anyone who thinks David sinned, we just read the story, it looks pretty bad to me, left the guy in the fields, has him assassinated, more or less, takes his wife, and then returns her back. What was he thinking? And why was he so seduced? Why did he do it? He had 6 wives right now. It's not like he's lacking, in wives. He has 6 wives right now. Michal, the daughter of Shaul, Abigail, she was one of the most beautiful women in the world. It lists all these different women, 5 top beauties, and she was a prophet also, and she and her son never sinned. He had 6 wives who were exceptional. They weren't just simple women, they were dumb blondes. No, they were we're talking about women of substance, prophets, and then what are you nuts? You're suddenly going after this young girl bathing on the rooftop, and she's married. You don't have better things to do with your time. But again, we mentioned that David said, "Give me a test," and God said, "It'll be a test in your tithas." But there was more than just the test of the passion, the testosterone's going so strong. What are you gonna do now? It wasn't just that. It was we saw Yosef, 17 years old, and every day she's coming at him with, changing her clothes twice a day, There's even midrashim that he digs his hands into the ground and 10 drops of semen come out of his finger. These are crazy midrashim. We're not talking about that with David HaMelech. But there's this raw, energy coming out of passion. I think he's no, it's not. There's something more fundamental going on for David right now. What was your question again? So I should remember. Oh, wait. Anyone who says, we're never going to do that with this. We'll just wait till the 5 more minutes. We're okay, I'll try it. So I'll get 10. In my notes, Yeah, so the Gemara in Shabbos says anyone who thinks David sinned is making a big mistake, right? But on the other hand, almost a year goes by, she gives birth to the kid, and all of a sudden, like, Uriah Hitti knocks on his door, not Uriah Hitti, Gad HaNavi comes to him and says to him, da-da-da-da-da, we'll do that later, but he rebukes David in a real nice way where it brings out of David the power of tshuva. And David says, I have sinned, and Uri said, and Hashem says to him, oh, because you said you've sinned right away without hesitation, so I'm gonna, you're not gonna die. But like, it took him a year. He didn't even know he did anything wrong until a prophet comes up to him, tells him certain things, and all of a sudden David realizes, oh my gosh, I sinned. Like 9 months later, when the baby's about to be born, when the baby was just born, the prophet comes up to him and says, it tells him a story, and David like opens up and says, you're right, I sinned. Like it took 9, but so I'm just saying, David himself said he sinned. And the Navi came up to him and said, and you're going to be punished for it. You might die, and 4 things will come out from your, 4 negative things will come out of your family, the sword will be in your house. Like, you don't get punishment, and you don't have like a confession of sin if you didn't sin. So there was something, he just didn't realize it was so subtle that 9 months went by, and until Gad HaNavi came, or Gad or Nassan HaNavi came up to him, until Nassan came up to him and told him that, he didn't even realize he had sinned. He thought everything he had done was fine. If anything, he thought everything he had done was the right thing. Yeah.
Okay, so really 2 main questions. One, so why did Shlomo HaMelech come out of this union between them? 2, okay.
Well, but that supports him, that he didn't sin. Because how could you have like Shlomo Melech coming out of this like union if an adulterer? Usually if you commit adultery with a woman, she's usher to you, and the child's a mom's heir. Right? So you can't have a Shlomo Melech coming out of, a union with a woman who's you just committed adultery with.
Right, okay, so, but, Natan Hanabi literally came to him and said, hey, you sinned.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, so 1, how is this not, or how is this a sin? And like, what's the deal here? Like, he made a mistake, but is it not a sin? Is it a sin? Like,
Right, yeah, right. Or it is a sin, but it's not the sin that we would have thought it is.
Why are we
And they're
making it so great? Like, he slept with a woman. Like, she wasn't, okay, it's kind of great. There was a get because, you
So
do
she
that
was a
when you go
single
to
woman.
battle. She's a single woman. It was like,
Yeah.
Kind of sleazy.
I don't call
I
it sleazy,
hesitate
but
to use that word, but I don't know what other word to use.
well, again, I hear, and we're superimposing our own, we have to know what was the temptation that he had in the first place. But again, like the Gemara he's quoting in Shabbos does say that if you think he made a sin, you're making a mistake, but it's not true. Like it just means if you think the sin is what you think, like sleazy, sleazy David, like giving into his taivas, you're wrong. And even if we say technically maybe he didn't do anything wrong because she was a single woman, but the spirit of the law, she's waiting for her husband to come back. Right? So maybe literally he didn't sin in terms of like, did he commit adultery? He didn't commit adultery. But she was a married woman who was, now she's a divorced woman, but she's waiting for her husband to come back. Right? So there were things that were going on which were questionable. And again, you had David who he asked Hashem for a test. And this was it.
Give him a test that is kind of still for halacha.
Right, like I'll find a halachic loophole.
Yeah.
It's legal, so therefore I'll do it. If I could find a way to, yeah.
Okay, hold on. Also, how did David not realize that he had sinned?
That's the question, right? That's the good question. Why didn't he realize until 9 months later when Nassan approached him, like the coin dropped? That's the question. Like, what was going on in his mind that he thought he didn't sin? And why was he seduced by this? Why did he allow himself to do this even? So we said before that David, when he saw Bathsheba, he saw that she was his bashert. He saw that somehow from the we said it was a Baal Ruach HaKodesh, according to Chazal, and he saw that she was from the days of creation, that was his wife. And then we asked the question, if that's his wife, so how is Uriah Hitti in the middle there? Like if she's your chosen one from from the days of creation, so why is Uriah Hitti married to this woman who's meant for you? We said before because Uriah Hitti was the weapon bearer of Goliath. And when Goliath was knocked onto the floor and was about to get decapitated, so David went to Uriah Hitti and asked his assistants to find the latch that would free the helmet of Goliath. And he said to Uriah Hitti, if you join our people, I'll find you a wife, and you could join us, if you show me the latch. And he showed him the latch, cut off his head, and Uriah Hitti joined us. And a bas kol went off and said, by your life, you make the daughters of Israel cheap, that you're like using them as bait to get a person to come and convert. By your life, your own wife will be taken. So there was an aspect of somehow Uriah Hitti clogged the wife that was meant for him. But that wife was meant to create a Shlomo HaMelech. She was the one, and she did in the end. Right? Shlomo HaMelech came out of her. So he saw in her more than just a cute girl that he was attracted to. He saw in her the future of the kingship continuing and Mashiach coming out of her. So it wasn't just like he was attracted to the beauty of this woman. He saw her as the one who would bring out this glory of Hashem that he so wanted to be in the world. So it was, yeah.
Okay. Also, why did we not hear Bathsheba raise any objections about all this?
It says they took her. I'm not really sure on that one. You're right. It's a real big question. Like, what was her relationship to this? Was she onus? Was it beyond her control? Was she awed by him? Or was she a participant? Was what was her relationship to her own husband Uriah Hitti? Like all those things. Though, you're right. Those are things to go into detail on. But I don't have the answers right now to that.
Why is this whole situation so morally gray in the first place?
It wasn't morally great. It was
morally gray. It's not really like black and white here.
It wasn't black and white, and David wrote the book of Tehillim about tshuva, and our guideline to Idiot's Guide to Tshuva was written by David, and this was something he had to go through to actually experience and teach us how to do tshuva. And at the end, he was forgiven. So there was something that he was supposed to get out of this as well.
Even if you failed?
Even if he failed.
What
There's even a Rav Tzadok HaKohen that says sometimes, I don't feel we would say, it's not so simple to say this, but Rav Tzadok HaKohen said that sometimes you'll have challenges in life where your free will is taken away. Like you're brought up in the hood, and like the fact that you went in certain directions in life, that might not be your part of your free will, so to speak. You were preordained too. It's like hard to hear that, but there is some aspect of that maybe the challenge that Hashem gave you is not whether you overcome these nisyonos because you're put into the lion's den of these tests. Maybe the challenge Hashem has for you is, are you going to pick yourself up? Are you going to clean yourself up? In other words, sometimes the sins that we do, we might not be as accountable as the ability that we have to overcome them or to fix them up. But the actual sin itself might be more like we're disposed toward because of our background. And he wants to bring a raya from David HaMelech that his free will on some level was taken away because Hashem tested him and made him, told him, I'm going to give you a test. But the real nisayon of David was, now that you have the test, how are you going to respond? Are you going to clean up your act? Are you going to say, I sinned? Are you acknowledging it? Will you accept upon yourself suffering and atonement? How will you handle the consequences of that action? He lost 4 kids from that. 4 of his children are in the future. We're going to see like one thing after the other is going to happen to David. He's going to have to deal with it each time. And he becomes greater and greater from it. But the test was not necessarily, are you going to fall? The test was, are you going to pick yourself up? So it's just a possibility, but I'm just bringing that out. Yeah.
Also, what would have success looked like for him in this test? Like, what would he have gotten out of from success?
He would have waited until Uriah Hitti naturally died in the battlefield. It says he took her too early. Had he waited and taken her at the proper time, even though he saw she was his basheret, but had he waited, then it would have been, then the child that she became pregnant with would have been the soul of the Mashiach. She became pregnant, and Nasan HaNavi comes to him and says that child, as one of the punishments, is that child that she just conceived, 9 months later, will die. And then for the next 7 days, the child is ill, and then the child passes away. But had he waited, that child would have been the holy continuation of David that was meant to be. Instead, he died. Later on, he continued being married to her, and he had Shlomo from her. And then God sent the message, he's my beloved one. Like there was even an acknowledgement of the child. But, okay, we opened up a can of worms. I'm sorry. We'll have to wait till tomorrow to get the rest of the story. I'll pretend we're going to finish it off tomorrow, and I'll just change the subject. Just kidding.